Hey, fourth grade, welcome to Mr. Kirchman's back porch. I'm glad you were all able to join me. If you've paid attention to lesson 1 and lesson 2, you probably know that crude oil is really important. We use it for like a zillion things. And if we didn't have crude oil, our world would be very, very different. It would probably be not quite so good. But if you've been paying attention also, you know that because it is a non-renewable resource, crude oil also has some built-in problems. Problem number 1, when you turn it into stuff like gasoline or diesel fuel or jet fuel and you burn it, it causes air pollution. That's a big problem. And that, of course, the air pollution adds to global climate change. You probably remember that when we were learning about coal and other non-renewables. The other problem with crude oil and non-renewables is that we will run out of them. We're not going to run out of them next Thursday, but we will run out of them. So because we're going to run out of them, it'd be pretty smart if we thought of a way to live without them. Now, today what we're going to focus on is a big problem with crude oil. That is not true of oil, but it's a really big problem, and it has to do with oil spills. Now, we had an oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico 4 years ago that completely changed the Gulf of Mexico. And one of my videos is about that oil spill, so I hope you'll take the time to watch it. In the meantime, I'm going to do a demonstration with you. And if you like to do it at home, it's really, really simple. And what we're going to do is we're going to study the properties of crude oil. And we're going to study how those properties make crude oil a big, big problem when there's an oil spill in an ecosystem like the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, now I want to introduce you to our experiment. First, we have the Gulf of Mexico. Now, let me move this out of the way. Yeah, that's better. I colored this water blue just to help us see things about it, okay? So obviously the Gulf of Mexico is not blue. All right, now I'm not going to use motor oil because motor oil is toxic, but corn oil, which you most likely have in your kitchen, or any kind of cooking oil, has properties that are very much the same as crude oil, except for the fact that it's not toxic. Now, also with me today, I have a feather. Now, a feather is going to represent a bird, and I also have some cotton, and I have it rolled up into a tube. You can see it's got a sad face on it. This cotton is going to represent an otter. Now, otters, if you don't know it, are what are called marine mammals. A marine mammal is a mammal like you or I, but it lives in the water. So a dolphin is a marine mammal, an otter is a marine mammal, a manatee is a marine mammal, and of course, just like you, even though they live in the water, they need to come up to breathe. Those are important features, okay? Birds, of course, also need to come up to breathe, but you should not be surprised to know that a marine bird, is a bird who gets most of its food by diving in the water for fish. I mean, that's why it's a marine bird, all right? So I'm going to pause it here and get one or two other things, and then we're going to begin. Okay, let's start with the bird. Now, a bird, of course, when a bird goes into the water to get a fish, let's say, he dives into the water, and he goes, and he comes right out. Now, I don't know if you can tell this, but the feather is dry. Let's try that again. The bird goes in, he comes out. Now, can you see that? Dry as a bone. And the reason for that is because birds are constantly preening. They're constantly putting these individual pieces of feather he's sticking them together with body oils, and that makes the bird waterproof. And because the bird is waterproof, it can also float. So if the bird stops being waterproof when he tries to go into the water, he can sink and drown. Or even if he gets out of the water, remember, oil is toxic, so when he's preening himself and he uses his mouth to preen himself, that toxic oil is now going into the bird's mouth and into his digestive system, making him sick. So right away, there's two reasons that oil is bad for the bird. Reason number one is it makes the bird no longer be waterproof. Reason number two is because it's toxic. When the bird cleans himself, or itself rather, it gets sick by ingesting or digesting the oil. Now, let's go back to our next friend, which is the otter. Now, I'm going to put the otter underwater. I'm going to make him sink. Now, otters and manatees and dolphins, they spend most of their life under the water. All right, you can see he's underwater now. Now, the otter, of course, just like any marine mammal, when he needs some air, he has to come up and down. When he wants to lay on and clean himself, he comes up, lays on a rock or whatever, and then back down. And when he's down under the water, he might be feeding, looking for oysters or whatever it is that he eats. So I'm going to go ahead and leave the otter down at the bottom of the water for now, okay, the bottom of the Gulf of Mexico. Now, let's take a look at the properties of oil. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of the oil and pour it on top of the water. Now, you can see it go in, right? But look what happened to it. I'm going to move the camera. Let's take a look at the top of the oil. And of course, what you're seeing is the oil is floating, and then did you notice those pieces when they came together? They are forming what is called an oil slick. Now I'm going to add a little bit more where you can see it. It looks like it's going to go down, but all of those little droplets of oil are going to grab together and form a big blob of oil. And of course, when a wave comes along, the wave pushes the oil and pushes it, and it might push it to the beach, or it might push it further out into the Gulf of Mexico, or it might push it into a wetland. Now, I'll bet you can guess why the oil is floating. It's floating because oil is lighter than water. Now I'm going to add some more, a little bit more. Now it is true that when oil gets cold, really cold, some of it will form clumps and sink to the bottom, but we'll deal with that later. Right now we're dealing with the water that's floating, all right? The oil rather that's floating. So let me get my spoon, and you can see, now let's go from the side. How does it look from the side? Can you see the slick of oil from the side? Let me turn it. There. You see that gold ring? That's the oil slick. Now, right now, our friend the otter is safe. He's below the water, right? So, because the oil floats, because it is lighter than water, it doesn't seem to be a problem for animals that live in the water. Now, but let's take a look at what's going to happen to the bird. Now, the bird, he's hungry, right? So he's flying overhead. The bird is flying overhead, he's flying overhead, and he sees a yummy looking fish. He doesn't know there's oil there. He's not a fourth grader. So he takes a dive into the water, and he comes out, and look. What do you think that is stuck to his feathers? You're absolutely right. It is the oil. And even if he dives into water Where there is no oil, the oil stays stuck to his feathers. Do you see that? He dives in, he comes out, the oil is stuck to his feathers. If I touch it with my fingers, you can probably see my fingers are shiny from that oil slick. No matter how many times he dives in, either he's going to get more oily, or if he goes in clean water, the oil's not going to get washed off. Oil is really hard to get off. So the bird is going to do what nature tells him to do. The bird is going to go someplace, he's going to land, and he's going to start to clean his feathers off. But in so doing, he's going to swallow a whole lot of that oil, which is going to make him sick. All right, now, let's go back to our otter. Now, you might think our friend the otter is safe and sound down at the bottom of the ocean. However, two things have to happen. Thing number one, he has to come up to breathe. Thing number two, a lot of the food he eats swims in shallow water. So up he's going to go. Up, up, up. He doesn't know there's oil up there, right? So up he goes. And you'll notice he too is covered with oil. His fur is soaked with toxic oil. So he's going to be like, ew, and he's going to go back in the water, and he's going to try to clean himself, but he's going to come up, and because oil does not mix with water, it stays stuck to his fur. So just like the bird, he's going to try to clean his fur off, but he is going to fail. And he's going to ingest that oil and make himself sick. And you can see that when I touch his fur, indeed, my fingers are oily again. So you can see how the properties of oil, the fact that oil does not mix with water, and the fact that it sits on the surface of water because it's lighter than water, those two facts work together to cause great harm to marine mammals and marine birds. Okay? I'll see you next time. Bye.